Our guest today is Sheu-Jane Gallagher, and we're extremely excited to have her on today and really get to learn about her experiences in the corporate world as an engineer, as well as in academia and now in the startup world. She has so much wisdom to share about leadership, building ventures, and believing first and foremost in your mission.
In addition to working for larger companies, her background in mechanical engineering also led her to become a professor at Wayne State University. She then caught the entrepreneurial bug while working as a manager and director at TechTown, a local incubator that helps Detroit based businesses launch and grow. Now she's reinventing marine coding with her team as the captain at Repela. Welcome, Sheu-Jane. Thank you so very much for being here. Isha and I are really excited to learn more about who you are, the company that you are the head captain of, but most importantly, just life lessons that you could share with aspiring entrepreneurs or founders that are in their journey and that are new. So, we wanted to first speak with you about your background. So I read that you actually have an engineering background, and I wanted to know if you could just share more about what motivated you to, if it was a transition from engineering into entrepreneurship, or you just have been able to marry both of them.
Uh, I absolutely have been able to marry my technical engineering background with entrepreneurship. So I'm really feeling like I'm in a good spot right now. And thank you, first of all, for having me on your podcast. I'm happy to be here to talk to you and to be able to share my story with your listeners. So how did I get into being an engineer? Um, I went to college, studied engineering for my undergraduate as well as for master's and my PhD. So I was engineering all the way through university. And before that, I guess my story goes all the way back to when my family first emigrated to the United States. I was born in Taiwan, and I'm a first generation American U.S. citizen. And the reason why my family came to the United States is because my father went to study graduate school on the East Coast in New Jersey, and he was studying civil engineering. So from the very beginning of my experience, I've always been exposed to a parent, and in my household have had parents that have worked in STEM careers. And I can remember from this was when I was even before kindergarten. My father would come home from school. So this was almost half a century ago. So my father would come home from school carrying a box of computer punch cards, because back then there were no PCs, and how people would use computers was that you would generate these punch cards, pieces of cardboard paper, and feed the punch cards into the computer, and then your input was on punch cards, your output was on punch cards. And I just have that memory in my mind when I was a young girl of my father coming and going from his schooling, carrying his box of punch cards. And at the time, he was also using an abacus. So this is an indication that I myself am not a spring chicken. I've been around for a while, because that was the technology in the day when I was growing up. So I've always been exposed to people working in technical careers. So when it came to choosing what to study in college, it was almost a no-brainer for me. It was about engineering, and that's what I pursued in college. When I graduated from university with my PhD, I jumped into an academic job. And that's what brought me from the East Coast to Detroit, Michigan, where I first started teaching in a faculty position at Wayne State University, so where you guys went to school as well. And I actually did not last in that position too long. Found myself going from academics into industry. I went to work in the automotive industry and parlayed my teaching into doing training for automotive companies, helping them implement new software systems and new applications that their people would use on the job.
Gosh, you've had quite the career, and it's not over yet.
No, it's hopefully
No,
I'm not done yet.
you're still going. You're still going.
I'm still going, and the path, my career path, has been very non-linear. So I started off in academics, working in a university, went into industry, and then from industry, initially not by my own doing, because what happened to me was I got laid off from my automotive job. From there, I found myself not being able to go back work in the automotive industry, and so I eventually started to work with some nonprofits, and that's how I wound up learning about and being exposed to entrepreneurship, because I was working with a nonprofit in Detroit that was focused on supporting people starting new companies. And it was a business incubator that was affiliated with Wayne State, a place called Techtown, where they provide training, resources for new entrepreneurs, as well as companies that are working on scaling and growing.
Around that time, you were being exposed to all of these different startups and founders. Were you also mentoring any founders or helping start programs at Techtown? What was your time at Techtown like?
Yeah, I was helping to start programs. One of my earlier roles at Techtown was to be the person that helped the aspiring entrepreneurs connect to the right resource at the right time in their entrepreneurial journey. So I was kind of an intake person. I would talk to the entrepreneur, help them assess what they needed in terms of programmatic support, other resources, mentorship, and made that connection for them. So I helped get them started through the door of the different offerings at Techtown. And doing that, as well as getting more involved in coaching entrepreneurs, made me I literally caught the entrepreneurial bug, and that's what led me to where I am today, working with a startup called Repela as one of the co-founders and the quote unquote captain of the company.
We love that you're called the captain, and I think it's so great that all of your titles reflect the industry that you guys are building this really, really important solution in. And I think one thing that Dominique and I were both really curious about as female founders ourselves, in 2020, I think it was about 28% of US tech startups had one woman on the founding team. And I think as you move into the industry you're in, there are probably even fewer female leaders of these companies. So how does it feel walking into, new opportunities to find funding, or even just conversations in general with other leaders in the same space as you? And how do you walk into a room and sort of teach yourself how to own the room and not fall victim to imposter syndrome? Because of that statistic of 28% just last year.
It's a position that actually I've always been in ever since the beginning of my career, and even before that in school, in engineering school. I was in the minority in terms of gender. So in my class of, let's say, 100 students, I was one of 5 females. So even back then, the percentages were very small of females to males in university. And then when I went into the workforce in my first job at Wayne State University, I was the only female faculty member in the department. So being the only female or one of a handful of females in a community is not anything that's new to me. How to be a female in a male-dominated setting, that's something that you definitely have to be very intentional about, because I do notice that even apples to apples in terms of, let's say, in a conversation, in a meeting, I may make the same statement as my male counterpart, but the male counterpart tends to be viewed as more of the authority figure. And so his statement has more resonance. It's received with more importance than my statement, which was literally the same thing, apples to apples. And so it's, I don't know that I've solved that. So I don't have a silver bullet to share with you, unfortunately. I think it's something that is always there. But it also depends on the community. It depends on the group that you're with. There are certainly more groups that are, let me say, less gender biased. And so everybody in the room is more equal, and you feel that camaraderie in the room. And in other settings, there is a bias. And so I guess my way of dealing with it is to focus on the goal and the purpose at hand, and make sure that I'm able to reach that. And if it means having to be more forceful to exert myself more in that setting, then that's what I need to do. That's what I do. And it's certainly not ideal, because in a perfect world, we all have an equal voice and we're all viewed as equally important. All of our contributions are not weighed or received through the bias or the lens of gender. But, you know, as you know, that's not where we're at right now.
It's really empowering to hear that even you don't have it figured out, and we all can do this work together to sort of change how we're viewed in different settings, and really make sure that we're getting an equal chance to make an impact. And changing the way that we're expressing ourselves in different rooms, I think, is a really important piece of advice that you just shared.
So I wanted to speak with you more about your experience with Repela. And one of the fundamental challenges that many entrepreneurs face is finding potential funders. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to know, how did you go about forming relationships with so-called gatekeepers into that world that provided you with value, not only financially, but value through human capital, through mentorships? Like, how did you gain that accessibility?
Well, the short answer to that, Dominique, is that we're still working on that. And absolutely, relationships are so important, and not just in a startup environment, business environment. All throughout life, relationships are so important. And my approach is, from the very beginning, it's about the relationship, and the right relation. When you form the right relationship, that means that you're aligned in terms of vision, mission, and purpose. And at the core of, there's a lot of things that you have to sort out when you're building relationships with a funder, with a strategic partner, with a customer, even with team members that you bring on board to work with you. But at the core, you need to make sure that you have that alignment of common principles, a common mission, common purpose. And if you have that solid core, then that makes the other things not easier, but at least you have that foundation to build upon. And what that foundation provides you also is trust. You develop a trust with people. And I think that trust component, which comes out of strong relationship buildings, is so invaluable. It's something that that can't exactly put a price tag to because of the tremendous value of the trust component. And that's what makes a difference in terms of bringing in partners, getting people to believe in you, to come in and join you in terms of giving you their resources, because they're aligned with you. You have a common mission, you have a common purpose, and you have that trust that, we're both in this together and we both want to see the same outcome.
I feel that any entrepreneur can apply that to when they're building their teams, when they're thinking if they have a corporation and they're dividing up shares, like trust is huge. Is there any specific resources or tools that you could share that maybe someone who is raising capital right now for an app or their business in general that they could access to help them kind of get their foot in the door to meeting a potential funder after they've identified that their mission, vision, and purpose are in alignment?
So before raising capital, so what I strongly recommend and suggest to entrepreneurs is that before getting to the step of raising capital, really spend a lot of time doing customer discovery. And I don't know if this is something that came out of your classes at Wayne State, going through customer discovery and really spending time digging into what your customers' wants and needs are, and identifying what value proposition you can provide your customers. I think getting that in place first is an important precursor to going out for funding, to going out in engaging with any external stakeholder, investor, strategic partner, etc. So getting that foundation of understanding of who your customers are, what's the job that they need to get done, and what are the challenges that they face in getting their job done, what are the unmet needs. Having that foundational knowledge first, getting that in place first, is a very critical precursor to then going out for funding. So to directly answer your question, Dominique, about what program, before pursuing funding, go through a program that teaches you about customer discovery. And there are programs, many programs available today that do that. And unfortunately, that wasn't always the approach when it came to starting a company and entrepreneurship and training programs for entrepreneurship. Oftentimes, the approach and classes were about, okay, you sit down, you write out a business plan which contains your financial projections, you do a market research, etc. And a lot of that was done in isolation. You'd be sitting at your desk doing research, and then you put your thoughts on paper. So customer discovery is another principle about customer discovery, is that you're not going to learn about your customers just sitting at your desk in isolation. You got to get out of the building, get in front of your customers and talk to them. That's customer discovery, is talking to your customers, getting direct feedback, getting direct insights from them. And so that type of process, and any program that will teach an entrepreneur about how to do real in-depth, insightful customer discovery, that's my first recommendation before you go for funding.
That's huge. That'll save them a lot of time.
Save you a lot of time, also put you in a better footing when you do start to have conversations with external stakeholders like investors, the partners that I mentioned. Unfortunately, oftentimes you only get one shot with people. Like when you have a conversation with investors, the investors can tend to form impressions of you very quickly. And so when you have that first intro, when you have that first conversation with a potential investor, you want to make a strong, good impression. And one way to really do that is to have your customer discovery down really, really tight.
You were a professor, you were an ecosystem builder, you were in the STEM space before you even started Repela. And so what about those experiences really helped you build this company that you're building right now?
I started off as an engineer, so I started off in the technology space, on the technology side of things. And it was mostly through osmosis, being around entrepreneurs, participating in different entrepreneurship programs, that I learned about business and about the process of starting a company. And I'm still learning about business, still learning about entrepreneurship, and I'm doing it on the job. So what I think helps me is that the two backgrounds that I have, the technical background and now the entrepreneurship background, having those two spaces available to me and bringing them together helps me be and serve in the role that I do for Repela, my startup company. And in that role as the captain, or as kind of the general manager, or in charge of making sure all the operations run smoothly and efficiently. It's about bringing people together from different backgrounds. So bringing people that are the deep tech people, the scientific people, the people that are doing discovery and inventions, and then the business people to see the value that the innovation will provide the marketplace. And so it takes being able to navigate those two spaces, and being able to kind of, at times, having to translate one side, information from one side to the other. And more broadly, it's about being able to put together a cohesive story about, how the technology, the invention, and the innovation that Repela is developing and bringing to market, how that will benefit the marketplace, and how that benefits customers and end users. And sometimes it's a struggle for the deep technical people to do that, because they're focused on the technology and they know the ins and outs, the nuts and bolts of how the technology works. But it's harder for them to translate that to how that will work in the hands of the customer. And that is part of my skill set. That's part of my responsibility, to be able to make sure that the customer sees the value of the innovation that Repela is developing.
Was there ever a time, I'm just curious, when you were explaining the idea of Repela to a customer and you realized they weren't quite understanding what you guys were trying to build. And so you went back and changed that messaging, because I know that happens a lot in the beginning.
Happens always. And so it's always, we're always refining our message, because that happens all the time. It's obvious to me, it's obvious to everybody at Repela what we're doing, but then when we try to communicate it to somebody else and tell them about Repela, if it doesn't resonate with them, it's not their fault. That's on us. And that's on us to be able to communicate the importance of our work, and to be able to have people understand it, first of all, and hopefully to embrace it and to value it. And so that's all on us. That's part of that's a big part of my responsibility. And so we're always, with every conversation that we have with somebody, telling them about Repela, always looking for signs, always looking for people's reactions, to see if their eyes light up, or they just shrug and say, so what? Or if they're like confused. And we're always taking that in and figuring out, well, what in our message was effective, what was ineffective, what can we do better next time? So the message is always changing, and it does also change with audience too. If you're talking to a general audience, if you're talking to somebody who is passionate about sustainability, somebody who is a real geek on innovation, on technology, we also have we fine-tune our message for the different audiences.
I read that Repela actually raised more than $1.3 million in grants and angel investing. So however you're communicating the value, it's working. If you were wondering, you were just saying, oh, sometimes, we have to transition a bit, and, and change up the verbiage depending on who you're speaking with. So I wanted to talk to you about how you've leveraged those impactful relationships into acquiring this type of investment. And if you could kind of shed some light on that process for anyone out there that would be in a similar situation in the future.
Mm-hmm. Sure. First, let me talk a little bit about the money that Repela has raised thus far. You mentioned the $1.3 million. A huge chunk of that was raised from the National Science Foundation, and they have at NSF a program that is dedicated to supporting innovation at small businesses. So NSF is our national research. They support basic research. They also support applied research, and then they support innovation that's happening at universities as well as small businesses. And so we're really, really fortunate that we were able to get this amount of funding from National Science Foundation. And it was done through a few different programs. So we received a few different grants from them. And one of the grants actually sent us through a boot camp that was all about customer discovery. So the customer discovery program that I was referring to earlier and strongly recommending to everybody, we went through a customer discovery program that was put on by the National Science Foundation. And they absolutely believe in customer discovery too. Reason why they started to put their grantees through their own version of a customer discovery program was because they were seeing that not enough of the inventions happening at research labs and universities were making it into the hands of the end users, into the hands of society where people can benefit from it. There was a drop off, a gap in that. And that was the purpose for them putting in place these extensive and really rigorous customer discovery programs. So we went through a National Science Foundation customer discovery program, and we also received 2 small business innovation awards from them that added up to over $1.3 million, and just tremendous value for us, because that's really helping us to accelerate the development of our technology. It's helped us to bring on new team members, and we've expanded our lab space as well. So just absolutely critical for us, especially at the stage of where we're at in terms of our technology development. To be frank, there are not too many investors, VC type investors, that will invest in a company at this particular stage, because there's still some things that need to be worked out in terms of the technology. And so the VCs may see it as too risky for them. And that's where National Science Foundation is playing a very critical role, not just for Repela, but for other technology companies that are doing the same type of thing and in the same stage of development. And so for us, that means that we're really focused on proving out our technology and moving it further along to make it acceptable for VC investment. And that's what we're focused on right now, is proving out the technology, validating it, getting customer feedback, getting customer buy-in, and getting that information in so that we can then speak to VCs about investing in the company and supporting us.
You spoke on a few things that I really loved earlier with TechTown and sharing about their accelerator programs. And then now with the NSF or National Science Foundation. So one thing I did want to ask you about is just the importance of the mentorship and the connections that you met, because oftentimes when you do speak to business owners who are established or emerging, it's funding. I need money. But oftentimes there is it's rich value in forming an impactful relationship that you could have over a long period of time. So much so that Professor Kim shared with us that he was like, that mentor really helped him when he was experiencing rough times within his career. So I wanted to know if you could speak a bit about your experience with the mentorship within the program and how impactful that was to Repela's building at this stage.
So when we were going through the NSF program, doing our customer discovery, the program facilitators were definitely mentors to us, and of the drill sergeant type. It was they design it to be like a boot camp where you're going through the program, and they push you, because they want you to know that in a startup environment is very, you got to act with sense of urgency. And so the mentors in the NSF program are more like drill sergeants. And I don't know if Ed recognizes this, but Ed, to me, is a mentor. So Ed had a mentor in his life, and now he's paying it forward, because now Ed is my mentor. Because actually, Repela, even though I've seen and been around and supported many different startup companies, Repela is my first startup company that I'm all in on. I've done a few projects for other companies, but I'm all in with Repela. I'm one of the co-founders. This is my all-encompassing full-time gig right now. And so for me, being in Repela, what is helping out is having somebody like Ed who's been there, done it before, and you see this. So it just happens over and over again. It's a cycle. It's like the circle of life is, after you go through the experience. Everybody's going to be going through it the first time. You go through the experience, you have others come in, support you, and then later on, you pay it forward. And that's, so Ed had that happen to me. And right now that's what I'm going through. So hopefully in the future, I'll be able to pay it forward to somebody else, to another aspiring entrepreneur.
I love that you mentioned that Ed has been a mentor to you.
I haven't said that I haven't told him that, but
yeah.
so now it's out there.
It is out there. I'm sure he'll listen to this episode and all the great things that you have to say about your journey and about that as well. So I'm sure he will know. For those listening to this episode, I was wondering if you could describe any steps or techniques that you used to reach out to your very first funders, whether that was using cold emails, cold LinkedIn messages. I know I've done that a lot personally. Or really any other resources that you've used to find grant opportunities. And then if you have any tips on making applications stand out when you're actually applying for funding, because now there are so many people applying to, especially grants that are more general and sort of catering to all kinds of companies. So if you have any tips on that, I think a lot of our listeners would appreciate those.
We're fortunate that the state of Michigan, for entrepreneurs that are here in Detroit and starting up companies in Michigan, we're fortunate that the state provides different resources, including programs as well as some funding opportunities. And so what was helpful for me was that when I worked at TechTown, I first of all knew about these programs. I was involved in some of these state of Michigan programs. They're run through the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, the MEDC. So I was very familiar with a lot of these MEDC programs. And what also was helpful was that I knew the people at the program. So this goes back to the importance of relationships. I knew many of the people at these programs. So when I joined Repela and it came time to exploring the different MEDC programs for support, for funding, that was very straightforward for us because of already being familiar with the programs, and probably more importantly, already knowing the people at these programs. So the programs that I'm referring to that entrepreneurs can consider are one is called the Business Accelerator Fund, which is an MEDC program that will pay for service providers, work done by service providers that are important for your company, that will help your company achieve certain milestones. So that's one very, very helpful MEDC program. Another is the Emerging Technology Fund, again, MEDC, and that is a match program that provides funding that matches. For us, it was matching the National Science Foundation grants. So once we got the NSF grant, MEDC put in some match funding. So those were really helpful programs for us, and really was wonderful leverage. Now, what we're working at is, and we're just more or less early stage, is building relationship with the VC community. So that's what we're just starting to do right now. And one reason was because we were getting our technology, de-risking the technology and getting it to an appropriate stage that would be suitable, would be a fit for VCs and their investment thesis. So in approaching VCs, and this is from Ed, so this is from Ed's experience, cold calls are bottom of the list. Cold calls, cold emails, try not to do that, because you're going to be one of how many emails in the VC's inbox or notes in that the VC receives, I don't remember what the numbers are, but they receive hundreds and hundreds of pitch decks that are cold emailed to them all the time, and it's going to be hard for you to stand out amongst all of that pile. So what we try to do is, first of all, do our research on the company, the VC firm, make sure we fit in their profile. You look up their portfolio, see who they've previously invested in, make sure we're a fit in terms of the technology space, and then understand what their investment thesis is. Are they impact investors, or something else? So then having that knowledge of what their goals are, what's their purpose, what do they need, what are they hoping to get out of it, and then this is where the next thing is to really mine your network. So your network, to see if there is any connection with the VC, so that your network can help introduce you to the VC. So getting a warm intro, it makes a big difference for you. And that's the approach that we're currently taking in reaching out to VCs and introducing Repela to them.
I love that you mentioned being really intentional about the space that the VCs may already be investing in, and actually doing the research to find out what they've previously invested in, and seeing if you fit in with that, because I think that goes a long way, and really make sure that you're spending time on more meaningful connections and on really trying to get those warm intros, like you said.
The research is important, not just for the VC, but for yourself, because you're going to save both parties time if you do that research and you see whether it's a fit or not. If it's not a fit, don't bother, and you're saving both of yourselves time.
Yeah, essentially, it sounds like you're doing customer discovery on the VC.
Yeah, I like that you put it that way. Yes. And customer discovery is not just a one-time thing. You don't do it at the very beginning of your startup journey. It's also it's a habit.
It's evolving.
It's evolving, and it becomes a habit too. And there's different purposes and different things that you're doing customer discovery on, but the core principle and the core approach of customer discovery, that's the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was really perfect timing when you shared about the customer discovery and kind of giving some tips and wanting to go in with a warm introduction. So, over the last few years, there has been tons of commentary about what to put in a pitch deck. You see different companies like Uber shared what their pitch deck looked like before they gained a lot of traction. So I wanted to know, when building your pitch decks and speaking to investors, what are the fundamentals that you actually ensure that's in your pitch deck? And would you say those are essential to securing funding for any other business that would be preparing for that?
What we make sure we have in our pitch deck is a compelling story. So first of all, a narrative that is compelling. And what that story about is that our customers have a problem. They are experiencing an unmet need, and Repela's work, Repela's innovation is the solution to that problem. And so what our pitch deck is about is the telling of that story. It's the telling of what our customers are doing, why they're having problems doing that today, and hence that's why Repela's innovation is critical and is needed. Another thing that we make sure that we tell in our story is our differentiation, because oftentimes you're not the only one out there. You're not the only startup. You're not the only company out there doing what you're doing. Other people, other companies may be doing similar things. And so why would somebody choose you over another product or technology that's very similar? So you've got to have a differentiation. And that's also an important part that we make sure we include in our story. Why Repela over all of the others that are out there that our customers can choose? So that unmet need that our customers have, why our solution addresses the unmet need, solves our customers' problem, and why Repela? What's unique? What's compelling? Why is Repela the one to address our customers' problem?
So what is Repela's compelling story? I had to ask.
I don't. Are either of you boaters?
I'm not. I'd love to be if the opportunity presented itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so well, we're definitely great residents of the Great Lakes, right?
Yep.
So what a wonderful natural resource we have all around us. And the Great Lakes represents 20% of the world's freshwater sources. Mm-hmm. And water is such a critical resource. What's happening today, though, is that the vessels, shipping vessels, commercial vessels, as well as recreational vessels that are on the Great Lakes and other bodies of water, they are using toxic bottom paints to treat the bottom of their hulls. Now, there's a good reason for them to be using these toxic paints. These paints prevent the attachment of slime, algae, and marine animals like barnacles and mussels from collecting on the underwater surfaces. And that type of collection is called biofouling. So these bottom paints prevent and control biofouling. However, at the same time, they are introducing toxic chemicals into our water. So what Repela is developing is a clean tech solution that is equally effective against controlling this biofouling, preventing algae and barnacles from attaching to underwater surfaces. But we do it without any toxic chemicals. So we are not introducing the harmful effect that today's bottom paints are creating. And so that's our innovation. And our goal is to reduce the amount of pollution that's being introduced into the water by these existing toxic paints. And the numbers are shocking. These bottom paints contain a biocide called copper, and copper is what prevents the fouling. In just the Great Lakes alone, over a year's period, we have 100 tons of copper leaching from these bottom paints into the water. So 100 tons of copper pollution. And the copper pollution is harmful to marine life. What it does to fish is it disrupts their reproduction cycle. It also harms the photosynthesis procedure in marine plants. So it's very harmful to aquatic life. And yet, this is a product that's being used today by boat owners, vessel owners.
Yeah, I was really blown away by just the statistics alone on your website when we were researching Repela and just understanding it more, especially because although we're passionate about the environment, we weren't boaters, so we're trying to piece things together. And so Professor Kim, he helped us kind of see a picture, but at least for me, I don't know about you, she really helped me kind of get a full picture of the exact issue and what's going on.
my startup is a chronic disease related startup, at least right now. But the more and more research that you do on chronic disease, you realize how it's linked to pretty much everything, the health of our relationships, the health of our environment. So I really appreciate you actually shedding light on the details of what the existing boat coating does and the difference between what that solution is and what your solution is, and why this new solution that Repela is creating is so important for not even just the fish, but like the health of our planet and the health of so many other things. So it really is important. And I was wondering what or who, I guess, on your team actually came across this problem and became passionate about it in the first place, because I'm sure someone was like starting to formulate a vision in their minds and came to the rest of you and said, hey, we have to do something about this.
One of our co-founders is a chemical engineering professor at Wayne State University. And it was at his lab at the university where the base invention was developed. And it's actually a platform technology. The invention is based on a material technology that prevents this biofouling, the attachment of proteins, as well as the aquatic grasses and animals that are attracted to surfaces in aqueous environments. So it's a platform technology because there's not only application in the marine industry, but it could potentially be applied in life science as well. For example, the clotting of stents and other devices, implant devices, they also tend to be subject to fouling. Not of barnacles and things like that, but of proteins. You get to you form biofilms on the surfaces of these artificial stents, and so it's the same. The material that Repela's technology is based on is the same. It could also be applied to life science. So that's where the invention came out, and our co-founder is actually also exploring some life science applications with the underlying invention as well as the marine. But Repela is focused on the marine application. I am a boater too, so before I joined the company, and when I joined the company actually, and Ed was telling me about what Repela was doing, I was immediately intrigued because I live on the East Riverfront here in Detroit. So if I look out my window, I can see the Detroit River, and I do a lot of boating in the area on the river as well as Lake St. Clair. So I know all about the fouling. I've cleaned many dirty boat bottoms, and it's a nuisance. And when Ed told me that they were working on this bottom paint that was eco-friendly, I was just like all in. Yeah.
I think it's really incredible that it can also be applied to artificial stents. So that's an incredibly important application for the technology. But in terms of for the company, what are your guys' next steps now that you have funding and you're building these VC relationships? What do those next steps look like for you?
We're also building relationships with potential partners that could help us manufacture the product. It would be manufactured as a coating or a paint product. And we initially do not want to manufacture it ourselves, because who wants to build a plant, and who wants to have to go out and raise the money to build the plant? It's a very capital intensive endeavor. So what we're doing instead, which is what we hope is a smarter approach, is to work with an existing paint manufacturer, coating manufacturer, so that we would contract them to do the production for us. So that's another relationship that we're currently in the process of building. And for the technology itself, we're getting ready to field test it on some boats this spring. So we'll be applying it on the hull of some boats here in the Great Lakes. We have some boat owners that have agreed to let us apply Repela's coating onto their boats and test it out over the boating season here. So, and we're also working on getting access to some boats in other locations. Because here in the Great Lakes is freshwater. We also want to field test our coating in saltwater, so perhaps in Florida, somewhere down there. And this is important for us to do this type of field testing because it's critical validation for our customers as well as potential investors. This is a critical milestone that demonstrates the proof of our technology and the effectiveness of the technology.
What are some of the key metrics that you're communicating to like these boat owners to convince them that this is the right coating for them? And then also you said investors. So what are some of the main things that you're talking about when you're pitching this to them to say that it's more effective?
Yeah, so the key metrics are not metrics that we came up with. They're metrics that we learned from our customers through customer discoveries. So they told us what the metrics are. They told us what is important to them. And so these are metrics that we have set as our North Star. This is where we need to travel to in order to meet our customers' needs. And so some of those metrics are performance, the ability to control the fouling on the underwater surface. So it's got to perform as well as the current products that they're using today. Okay, so we're not aiming for performance that's almost as good as what they're using today. We're aiming for performance that meets and exceeds what they're currently using today. Okay, that's one metric. Another metric is the application process. So the paint goes and the coating goes on like you would paint a structure with a brush or you would spray it on. So we're developing an application process that also meets the metric of an application process that our customers are already familiar with and that they can easily implement. The third metric is durability. So our coating, our customers that own recreational boats, they typically are applying this type of coating at the beginning of each new boating season. And so we are developing our technology with that same type of life cycle. And that's probably the third metric that we have that we're focused on hitting with our product development. So all of these metrics are our customers' metrics. They're not metrics that we came up with, and we're working towards hitting those customer requirements.
I think it's really valuable that you mentioned that your customers told you your metrics. I think I've thought about that a little bit, but it makes me want to do a deeper dive every now and then to make sure that we're still building a product that's improving metrics that are important to them. And then in turn, that's how you end up building a valuable product.
Oftentimes, from what I've observed, when you start the entrepreneurship journey, as a visionary, as many of us are, you think this idea is going to be amazing. I know exactly how to solve this problem. And you get out there and you think you're going to conquer it all. And then it's like, hold on, let me back it up a bit. And I had that experience where I said, oh, okay, I thought my customer was someone totally different. And then as I continued to learn and test out the ideas I had, which is something you also shared, and that's really valuable because you could test out the initial ideas you have through a potential partnership, like you spoke about with the other boat owners and testing out the products, right? So
Mhm.
just testing that out and then you getting feedback. So it's really important to have self awareness to know when it is time to be flexible and willingness as well, I think, to change some things because the idea won't be the same as when you initially started. So I
Mhm.
really like that you said, it's really about following what your customers want and need. And you also broke it down, you all's performance metrics, which I thought was great as well. I'm one of those folks, I'm more application based. So if I'm listening to a podcast and you give me 3 steps, I'll remember that, right? So you shared, you not only want to meet the expectations, but exceed that, right?
Mhm.
And when you spoke about innovation, I thought that was huge because you always want to be looking at what's to come. How can you continue to innovate so you can move along versus being stagnant? The application process, making sure that it's easily used, by your customers, I thought was really great. And then lastly, the durability with your product. So thank you so much for sharing that. I thought those were just so great. I was over here, like I said, taking some notes.
I have a confession.
What's that?
We didn't start off. We didn't start off thinking this way, and it was a rude awakening as we were going through our customer discovery journey. When we thought, because we initially had a different application process for our technology, and we thought, customers, they'll learn it and they'll be willing to switch to this new application process. They just totally rejected our application process, and so that made us quickly pivot our technology. And that hit us in the face, and that made us realize that we needed to change up the application process and switch it to a way that was more in line with what our customers wanted. So we didn't know that we figured that out the hard way. It was a lesson learned for us.
I wanted to just ask you a few questions that reflect back on your career, both personally and professionally, and you spoke about the importance of mission, vision, and purpose in business, and when you're wanting to seek an investor, right? But I wanted to speak with you more about what's your purpose and how do you define purpose? Do you feel that you're still seeking that, or do you feel like this is a part of your daily life at this time? Just really curious about that.
As I shared before, my career was definitely not a linear trajectory. It was very curvy, and at times I didn't quite know where I was going to go next with it. And I'm fortunate that my career path has brought me to where I am today, where I do feel a strong sense of purpose in what I'm doing with Repela. And that strong sense of purpose comes from being able to take a, a challenging and hard to do and deep science technology invention and bring it, develop it, to bring it to the market and get it to the hands of customers to solve a problem, and to solve a problem that also makes our environment, makes the Great Lakes, makes our water systems more environmentally sustainable. And so it's bringing in passion, care, concern for the environment, my love for the water, and also my technical background, the analytical background from engineering, being able to communicate the technology to customers, to external stakeholders, being able to do all of that has brought me to a place where I am today, this place where I really feel a strong sense of purpose and where I am satisfied that I'm using my skills and my talents to to the best of my best ability. So and it's totally I can't take any credit for making myself get to where I am today. A lot of it was serendipity, unplanned, and it happened, and I'm very grateful for that.
Well, I think that's so powerful because from what you just share, your purpose isn't rooted in you. It's actually bigger than you. You could have shared, hey, I just want to do this and sell some product and hopefully it gets on the market. But no, you talked about just making a greater impact, and that impact will impact the lives of many. So I really, really loved that you shared that. I thought it was really inspirational.
And well, that's the power that entrepreneurship holds, right? Is the ability to make that impact, to change and improve people's quality of lives, like what both of you are doing with your ventures. Yeah.
I often think that just like when I pick podcasts, I look at the topics and industry the person speaking is in, and it's always so hopeful for me. And sometimes those individuals can be experiencing the some of the same things you did, but at a different time in their life. So I was just wondering if you had any type of words of wisdom that you would share with um, that younger self of yours with our audience.
I think it's important for entrepreneurs to be really comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is that, especially for first-time entrepreneurs, which I myself am one of them, there's just going to be so much that you don't know, and that's okay. That's okay. And so that's possibly the uncomfortable part. It may make you uncomfortable, and being uncomfortable is also okay. So just embrace that uncertainty, embrace the notion that you are learning, you are exploring, and this is also a growth journey for yourself on a personal level. And so be comfortable with that uncomfortable situation. And this probably applies to not just entrepreneurship, but a lot of other circumstances where you're going through something for the first time and it's going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be a lot of things that you are not aware of. That's okay, and embrace that. And by embracing that, what that means is that make sure you ask questions. Don't be afraid, don't be shy, don't be embarrassed to ask questions and to say, I don't know about this. I don't know what that means. Tell me. And that's how you learn. And so that's one bit of advice I would share with aspiring entrepreneurs. Another bit of advice that I would share, maybe this is more tailored towards entrepreneurs working in a STEM area, is make sure that you are in love with your customer's problem. Make sure you fall in love with your customer's problem and not with your solution. Fall in love with your customer's problem, not your solution. Why do I say that? Oftentimes, inventors, technologists, they come up with the technology first, and then they try to push it out there and find somebody who will love it as much as they do. It's got to be the other way around. You got to be more focused and more determined about the problem and finding a way to solve the problem, which then you develop the technology to solve that problem. So fall in love with the problem and not your solution.
And last but not least, where can someone find you if they would love to connect with you and follow your journey?
You can find me on Twitter. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, as well as through Repela's website. So I can send you all of that information and you can post that along with the other information.
Absolutely. Thank you again. We are so very appreciative of having this time with you, learning from you. We appreciate you and value the work that you're doing. We're excited for what's to come. Congratulations already for what you and your team have accomplished, Captain. And we can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to both of you. And my appreciation back to you too for dedicating yourself and time to hosting these podcasts so that we can all share our stories, our journeys, but also kudos to each of you on your own entrepreneurial journeys and your passion and your focus on improving quality of life for your customers.